Okay. My name is Wanda Lock, and I am currently living in Lake Country in the Okanagan, where I have a studio as well. So that's where I work, is out of my studio at home. And yeah, I have a family, and I have also a part-time gig as curator of the Lake Country Art Gallery. Oh, that is a loaded question, especially at this stage of my working career. So anything can spark an idea. Literature, film, video, color, my cat, it can be anything. And I just sort of go from there. So I'm in the studio every day, sometimes just for a moment or two before or after work, but every day I spend time in the studio, and there's always mark to paper, at the very least, if not working on a bigger project, but at the very least it's hand to paper, and it's usually a recording of that day. So again, it could be something I read on social media, it could be an encounter that I had someone at the Lake Country Art Gallery, it could be a conversation I had with my child in the morning, it could be anything. And these recordings on paper, as we're going to call them loosely, I mean they could be drawings, they could be collage, I don't know what they are, start to pile up. They accumulate in corners of the studio, and it's those accumulations of mark to paper that are sort of the seed to bigger projects. What makes my heart sing is probably traditional oil painting. The smell of oil when you walk into a painter's studio I just think is the best ever. So my art education, my formal art education, was in painting and in oil paint. However, that was a long time ago. And things change, and we try things. As we go in and out of our practice, we tend to try everything. So, if you come to my studio if you came to my studio today, you would see the drawings on my small drawing table. You would see a collection of sculptural found pieces from thrift stores that are accumulating and building up these structural vignettes on a side table. You would find collage, because I always like to collage too, and they kind of have a conversation between the drawings on paper so there's always that conversation happening as well. You will find canvases with oil painting on them, and you will find large sheets of paper stapled to the wall that will have anything from spray paint. I'm really investigating spray paint at the moment, and spray paint, house paint together, and then putting oil on top of that too. Is that archival or not? I have no idea, but that's really not a concern of mine at the moment. So there's more than one project happening at one time in the studio, and whatever the mood permits is where I kind of put my energies in any particular day. So what a great opportunity for an artist to do site-specific work, and how, I wouldn't say unusual, but unusual, romantic, quirky for an airport too. So this opportunity really stretches the idea of what art is for, how art is looked at, who is looking at the artwork, why they're looking at, and all the surroundings that are taking part that may or may not inform the work in the space. So we think about airports, and airports are fascinating places in and of themselves. If you ever spent any time, whether you're waiting for someone or you're going on a trip, there's so many levels of emotions in one spot, and I find that fascinating. And so how do you take all that and put it into a piece of work? And it was some thinking that I had to really kind of research that, and I jumped on James Joyce's Ulysses because it's a day in a life, and I like the idea of a day in a life in an airport, and how a day captures all those emotions in 24 hours. And so I started there. Ulysses is a very big book. I started reading it, which is great, but it wasn't quite fulfilling. It was too, even though it was a day, 24 hours, it wasn't quite meeting that sort of, I don't know, yumminess that I was looking for. And so I jumped to the end of the book, which is Molly Bloom's soliloquy at the end. And she is in bed after a day, and if you know the story, you know what she's done throughout the day. And she's sort of looking back on the day as night is drawing near and she's off to sleep. And that's what I sort of focused on. And so that was my jumping point, but then I realized that was a lot in that little soliloquy too. It's not a little soliloquy, it's a large piece. So then I realized that Kate Bush did it all in 3 minutes. So I jumped to the Kate Bush video, which is her 1989 album Sensual World, where the title track, The Sensual World, is an ode to Molly Bloom in the soliloquy of James Joyce. So using those texts, the text from Kate Bush's piece, as well as the video, because I referenced the video in the piece that is in the airport, that was the jumping off point. The artwork itself is, I do believe, 36 feet by 8 feet, but there's spaces in between the piece, so it does span 39 feet in total. And they're little snippets of just sort of what Molly is speaking about, as well as an artist reinterpreting work and a direct quote from Kate Bush's song. So we start out in a landscape where there is a writer's desk and a cup of tea or coffee or whatever you want it to be, and a vase of flowers in this landscape. And the landscape is referencing, the trees in the landscape are referencing the Kate Bush video. You as a viewer don't need to know that. That's a side note, but that's where we're starting off, is at the writer's table. And then the next 8 by 8 foot piece are 2 pheasants, golden pheasants, in front of a gate, and those could be Kate and Molly, is kind of how I referenced them. Those are my two subjects in the piece. And the globe on top of the gate references, there's a moon in the video, but I didn't want to do a moon piece because that's such a cliche with the, whatever. So I made a gate with globes, so that's too. So a beautiful, lush landscape, lots of texture, lots of pattern. Again, kind of maybe a little bit over the top decorative and romantic, but that's okay, because that's what it's about. The middle piece, or the third piece, is seed cake. So in Kate Bush's video, she mentions taking a taste of seed cake from her lover's mouth. So I made a seed cake, which is a rebus puzzle, that's how you pronounce it, I think, too, where you have the seed pods and then the cake, and then it's a seed cake kind of idea. So it's a fun puzzle piece as well. And it's kind of the center of the exhibition. I kind of think that's sort of where it all starts. It's the first line in the Kate Bush song. And then the very last piece is a 12 feet by 8 foot. It's a mural from a 1980, maybe 89 Sears catalog, where you had those murals that you put in rec rooms downstairs. So that's what it is, and it actually is one from that. I found it at a garage sale. And I like the piece because, in part, again, in the Kate Bush song, she says, "A flower of the mountain," and I thought that was a nice piece to put with that. So we have, it's a little bit of nostalgia because it's a mural from our Sears catalog days. It also kind of references the beautiful British Columbia magazine that used to be out for a long time ago too, in the 70s and the 80s. It's got that look. And I also thought it was specific to an airport as well, so it kind of references, location and British Columbia, and it may be a bit of a cliche and over-romanticizing it as well, but again, that's the whole point of the whole piece, so there you go. Well, it's interesting that you're going to be looking up at an airport. That's kind of, that's kind of interesting. So when I created the piece, I wasn't creating it looking up, I was creating it full-on straight in the studio. And initially, it was going to be in a space where people walked by. So when I was creating the work, I knew that people would be walking by and only getting snippets and not seeing the piece in its whole necessarily. Or not, you'd have to take some effort in order to see the piece as a whole, and that was totally okay. It's in 4 parts. 4 parts don't need to be seen all together, just one at a time, or just a little chunk of it is totally good. But at the airport, now that it's up, we'll be able to see it all in one too, so that's interesting as well too. So that was not something I considered at great length, not until towards the end. And yeah, so the takeaway is curiosity, I hope, or the cake is fun, right? And I hope it lightens the mood. It's colorful, it's bright, it's decorative, it's pretty. Can we say pretty? I think we say pretty. And I hope it's an uplifting piece.